Hello and well met. This is Layron with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to go over some GM game prep. I am using the D&D 5e rule set, but this will apply to almost any rule set depending on what it's based on. But essentially anything core based or anything related to a fantasy game would probably work. This is going to just kind of cover some of the basics, some of the things that you want to consider when you're setting up your sessions. So one of the things that I had done early on is I had too many things going on at once, and I think you can get pretty easily overwhelmed if you're new to Fantasy Grounds or to GMing in general. So one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm setting up a GM prep session, which is just the name of the campaign. And then I've selected the D&D rule set, so that's already selected. And then you can choose how you want to connect, so you can go through the server. In this case, I'm just setting up local area network so that I can just operate and not have to worry about anyone connecting to my table. However, if you're going to have players, you're probably going to want to set up this public and go to the cloud, password protect your session, and then give your players the credentials, your username, your GM name, that sort of thing. And then they'll be able to find you in the lobby when they actually join the campaign. So the main thing is that if you have any extensions that you're going to load up, this would be the time to do it. I don't really run with too many extensions. If you want any suggestions, the only one that I use right now is the font extension, which is free on the Fantasy Grounds Forge. And then I'm using this newer extension. This is put out by Bane. It's called The Joy of Painting. And what it does is it gives you a palette to store your assets on from the art packs and such and tokens, so that when you're playing, you have easier access to it. You don't have to dig through the interface. So it's more of a quality of life thing. This is not an official extension, but I hope that at some point SmiteWorks will include something like this in the base program. I think it would help a lot of people. And then anything else that you might need, maybe for character creation or some kind of thing like that, but I don't really need too much more than that. You can change the theme if you want to. I think I'm just going to stick with the base theme so it doesn't confuse newer people. And that's pretty much it. So I've just got couple basic extensions here. One is to increase the font size in the chat window. And then the other one is just kind of more of a feature that I probably don't even need for this session because I'm not planning on building any maps. So I'll go ahead and disable that. So you got to remember that some of these features are just for one certain thing. And if you don't need it, don't load it. I mean, that's bottom line, but you don't always know what you need and what you don't need, but you'll find out as you play what stuff you need and what stuff you don't. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start. While that's loading, I wanted to say that we just finished our Founders Day Weekend 6, which was really successful. We had quite two or three different shows, and then we did a All Things Fantasy Grounds with Rob 2E, and we gave away a copy of the rule set for the Shadow of the Demon Lord, so it was a lot of fun. We also had probably about 8 or 9 different games, and then we had just different people coming in and checking things out, and it was a lot of fun. So hopefully you guys are able to enjoy that. But nonetheless, I'm going to state that this particular setup isn't necessarily D&D 5e only. So if you can imagine you're running Pathfinder or maybe even Shadow of the Demon Lord, or perhaps one of the other rule sets that's similar, maybe Castles and Crusades, whatever it might be. Some of these things, or most of them, will apply to that. So if you're planning on running a new campaign soon or a one-shot, this will probably help you a little bit depending on what your needs are. But essentially, this is the launch screen that I have already gone through. I put this decal in the background just for the branding, but I went ahead and changed my dice color already, so that's something I've already dealt with. I also started moving the windows around, and that's one of the things that you're going to find that's probably going to drive you nuts when you first start using Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to start taking these windows and placing them where I want them to go. So in this case, this is the combat tracker, and I'm kind of overlaying it over the chat window, but when you first come on here, it's essentially kind of tall and it's also skinny like so. And when you actually get in there, you can change the size of this. So I unlocked it, and I'm going to make this smaller so it's not so big. And then the combat tracker, I just kind of overlay it like that. You don't really need too much of the chat window, and if you really need to see behind it for some reason, you can always close the combat tracker temporarily and then reopen it when you need it. So one of the things that would be very helpful to know, and when you first start off a campaign like this, is that yes, you're going to have to load the rule books and such, but you're going to also want to lay out the table, which is kind of important in regards to being able to view things. So just remember, the first time that you open something, it's usually going to open in the middle. So for instance, the vehicles, that opens right in the middle because I haven't opened this record yet and I haven't moved it. So if I take this and I move it down here in the corner and close it, the next time I open that up, it's going to go in that corner here. So in every session that you start with Fantasy Grounds or a new campaign, once you do this, you don't have to do it again usually, unless you had a corrupted database or something like that, then you might have to redo it. But in this case, all I'm doing is kind of laying out the windows. So I make myself kind of like a crib sheet or a cheat sheet. So you can go into the player mode, or you can use a story entry if you want, however you want to do it. But I'm going to use a note. So that's in the player section. This is mainly set up for players, but I also use it as well. So this is going to be my crib sheet or my cheat load sheet here that I want to use for my games. So this is something that kind of helps me when I'm getting set up each day or each time we run the campaign. So I'm going to add an item here, which is on the very bottom here. And I'm just going to call this my setup sheet. I am giving it a number in case I get more than one of these. And usually I do. I'll have one for every session. That way I can keep track of what I researched and the things that I needed for those sessions. So this is going to be my crib sheet, which is essentially just a bunch of links that you can use throughout the game session. That way you're not getting lost and you have easier access to things. So one of the things I do with the crib sheet is I'll left click on the link on the top left corner and I'll drag it down to this hotkey. So the next time I come up to log into Fantasy Grounds and everything's closed, it'll actually just be here. I click on the crib sheet, it'll bring that up. So rather than having 20 different links down here on the bottom, I'm going to just put all my links on the crib sheet so that way I can redo this if I need to. It's all in one spot. I don't have to go to 50,000 different shortcuts at the bottom. They'll all be on one sheet. So generally speaking, what I'll do with this initially is I will take and put my setup in here. So setup would be like the combat tracker. That's the first thing you open. So I can take that and link that to the sheet, and I'll just label this CT for combat tracker. So this is my setup part. And then maybe you want the party sheet. So the next link I'm going to make is for the party sheet, which is another tool that you use for running games. So I'm going to go ahead and drag the party sheet, which is this icon over here. It looks like 3 people standing together. And this is what you use to manage your campaign. So I'm going to take and put this over here because the first time you open something, it always opens right smack dab in the middle. So once you open something for the first time, move it to where you want it to go and then leave it there. And then when you actually don't need it anymore, you can close it. Now, the next time I bring that back up, clicking on the party sheet, it's going to open here where I want it to, not in the middle of the screen. So this is a helpful tip to know this about Fantasy Grounds. Whenever you open a new record or a new data folder, it's always going to open in the middle, and that's just by default. So if you know that, then whenever you open up something new, just be prepared to move it where you want it, resize the window, and then leave it there. And then when you don't need it anymore, close it. And the next time you pop it up, you'll know where it's supposed to go, or you'll get familiar with it. So the next thing is the party sheet. So I'm going to take this and left click and drag it over here. And I'm just going to put PS for party sheet. So these are just shortcuts that I'm going to bring up as soon as I launch my campaign. So if I come to the table and it's like this when I first start, I'm going to bring up the crib sheet and I'm just going to click on these links, and that's going to put everything where I want it right off the get-go. So I'm not digging around looking for things and moving around too much. So this is a little bit quicker to have all the links in the same place. Uniformly, you could do this down here on the bottom if you want. You can put your links down there, but generally I just like one sheet, one shortcut, and then just kind of work from here. So those are just some of the shortcuts that I might have for this particular campaign. And now I'm going to start opening up the campaign data or the modules that I'm going to use for the actual adventure. So if I come over here to modules, I click on that. Right now, all I have is the SRD loaded. And the reason I did that, because I didn't have any rule set at all loaded, and I figured just having the SRD was a good start. So I already activated those when the campaign setup came. But now I'm going to click on the activation button and actually load up a module. So in this case, this will be Lost Mine of Phandelver, or maybe one of the other starter sets. Because you have the D&D Essentials, you have the Stranger Things, and you have Stormwreck Isle. Maybe I'll do Stormwreck Isle instead, because I usually do Lost Mine of Phandelver, and I think people are kind of sick of that. So let me look for Stormwreck, and we'll use that as our starting adventure. So I went ahead down here and searched for Storm. And there's 3 different modules that are sections to this. Basically, it's split up into a couple different things. So you have the player side of things, and then you have the Stormwreck Isle adventure. So you can load both of these, and if you don't have characters already created, or you don't really have any of the rules, you can load up this player section, and it will add some things for you so that you can get started on playing right away. And I don't really think I need a whole lot more, but I do have a module that provides third-party content so that you can expand what you're playing with if you want. So this is from the DM Skill. This is by Grim Press. And there's also a module or a book that you can load with it called Stars Over Stormwreck, which is kind of a seafaring adventure. Maybe it'll take you there or back, depending on how you want to play the campaign or the game. So I don't need to load those, but there are tons of things out there that will help supplement your games if you need to. But in this case, I don't need to overcomplicate this, and I don't want to load, 20,000 books. You don't really need to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. That's all the modules I want to load. However, if you wanted to load, like, let's say some of Rob Tui's coding effects or something like that, you could load that. Or maybe you need more additional maps or something like that. But you don't really want to load a lot of different things. So the only thing I'm going to probably load here in addition to these is if I want to customize the characters, or if you want to level up, or if you want to build new characters, you'll have to have at least the player's handbook or the player's guide. And then you can also load the pre-gens. So we'll take a look at the pre-gens that come with the adventure and then decide if we want to load anything else. The only thing I would probably load are just a few additional modules to make character creation and setting up characters a little bit quicker and a little bit more defined and also more comprehensive. But in this case, I don't really need to do that. So I'll go ahead and just close this for now. And here is the Stormwreck Isle, and this is the player's guide. So I'm going to click on the book, and this is the adventure. And there's pre-gens here. So if you click on this, that brings that window up. You can also take this and drag this over to your crib sheet, because this is going to be what you're going to use to help set up your game and make it a lot faster for you when you actually are ready to go. So this is something that you'll learn over time when you need to set up. So I'm going to take this pre-gen thing, put this here, and then that way when I'm doing this, I don't have to worry about looking for it, digging through all these different menus. There's the pre-gens right there. And then the reference manual is the actual adventure. So I'll go ahead and bring that down here. And then for the player side of things, maybe I want to take a look at this reference manual. So this one is the adventure for Stormwreck Isle. So I'll just put SI adventure. That way I know what this is. And then this one will be the player's guide. So I'm going to drag that over here. And this one is for GMs that don't have a lot of books and you want to actually give your players some characters to start with. So you're not spending 2 or 3 hours building characters. So I'll just put players reference or something like that there. So there's that. So these are just the main things that I need for the campaign. And again, I have the SRD loaded just in case I need a couple new items or something, or if there's spells that need to be parsed or whatever it is, those will be available, or at least you'll see the descriptions of them. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. So that's about all I need for right now. So when I come onto the table for the first time and I load up, I'll already have that stuff figured out. So if I open up my crib sheet, I'm going to open the combat tracker. I'm going to open up the party sheet. I'm going to open up the pre-gens. And the pre-gens, as you can see, go smack dab in the center. This is the only window that cannot be relocated in Fantasy Grounds. So regardless of where I move this to, I believe it always opens in the center. Yeah, so anything related to character selection or creation is going to locate in the center no matter where you move it. This is the only exception. But I'm going to go ahead and add these to the campaign. So right now, I don't have any characters as part of this campaign. These are all first level pre-gens that come with the adventure. Lost Mine of Fandelver also has pre-gens, and so do the other starter box sets. So if I want to add these, I wanted to show you where these are at. So right now, they're not part of the campaign. This is where you select them from. But if you open up characters, this is where you build characters and where you select them and manage them. So I click this green plus button here, this green button with a little plus sign. This will add them to the campaign. So now they're added as part of the campaign. And again, this one will not relocate because it's a character selection window. So regardless of wherever I put that, it's always going to be in the middle. And I think that has to do with when the people log in the first time, they don't want it buried underneath a bunch of windows. So now that these are part of the campaign, when the players log onto the table, they can select one of those players. But as a GM doing my due diligence, I'm going to look over those characters before anyone gets to the table. And I'm also going to set up a shortcut for this character selection so I don't have to look for it again, and it's right where I need it, and I'm not going to sit there and fight it when I get back up on the table. So this is the pre-gens. I probably don't need that again, but if I do, it's right there. It'll be popped up. And then here are the reference manuals. So I'm going to open up the reference manual for the adventure. And again, it opens in the center, but I'm going to go ahead and move this sheet here for the reference manual. And I'm going to resize this window and put it where I want it to go, because the next time I open that up, I want it to go where I left it, which is right there. And then there's the player's reference, which is kind of the same thing, but it is for the players. And this goes over the character content. And this is for the pre-gens. So now that I have those set up, whenever I open those up, they're going to go where I left them. And that's an important thing to remember, is size your windows, put them where you want, and then next time you come back to that, you'll know where they're going to open up at, or at least have an idea, and you know they're not going to open up right in the center of the game. So that's kind of an important thing. So now that we have those, I've already added the players to the campaign. So here's the character manager again. These are all the players. Now we need to select some portraits, and I actually will want to look over the characters because I'm not sure what they have, what they don't have, if they're missing anything, if they need any automation, all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do first is add some pictures or artwork to these so that I can differentiate them easier. I would normally allow the players to do this when they log into the table. However, since we're going over this, I wanted to show you an easier way to add artwork to the players. So I'm going to open up each character sheet, and one of the things that I do is I'm going to move my crib sheet over here and move all the characters to a pile over here. And you'll notice whenever I open it, it's right smack dab in the center. So what I want to do is take all these and stack them like a deck of cards so that it's easier. Next time I come back to this, I don't have to worry about it covering something. They're always going to be here on the right-hand side of the combat tracker. So I'm just going to do this the first time. Once I do this, I won't have to do it again. So this is just kind of an organizational tactic here. This isn't critical. I mean, you don't have to do this. This is just a way to make things a little easier on you. And now that I've got the character selection out of the way, I'll just move this down and close it. I don't really need that right now. And as a matter of fact, the crib sheet, I'm going to take and I will link each character on here just so I have a spot for them. And what I'll do is I'll put players or characters or whatever. And then what I'll do is when they come on the table, I'll get their Discord name, their email address, and I'll annotate those next to each character as I need them so I can find them later on, especially if it's a new campaign and you don't know anyone. So this is just a place where I'm going to put the characters once they're done. But going back to the instruction, I'm going to go to the assets, and I'm going to choose some portraits for the characters so that it's easier to do instead of trying to do it through the character. So when you click on this portrait, it opens up these bags, and then you have to come down here and you're going to pick whatever folder, and then you're going to pick one at a time like that. And that's okay, but it takes way too long to wait for that to open and then select it manually for each character sheet. That'll probably take you longer than building a basic character because you're waiting for the art assets to load, and you're going to do it one at a time, and you're repeating this every time. So if you're a GM and you want to assign portraits quicker, one of the ways to do it is to do it through the assets instead of using the character sheet, which is going to take too long. So I'm going to close this actually. And what I want to do is click on portraits in the assets window. And then I'm going to navigate to the Fantasy Grounds Fantasy folder like we had before, stretch this out, and now I can drag and drop these to the character sheets without having to go through every single character sheet to select this. So this is a soldier cleric. So I'm just going to take this guy here and drag it over onto the sheet. And then I'm going to drag it up onto the combat tracker and then close it. Here's a sage wizard, a high elf. So I'm going to pick this female wizard here. Here we go, elf. There we go. So we'll just make this a female wizard. Again, I'm just going to drag this over to the combat tracker and then close it. And now we have a noble human paladin. So I'm just going to find something that kind of looks close. Looks like we got something here. Here's a human female paladin. And let's go with, let's see, who do we got here? It's really not important, but this probably takes more time than it should. And that's something you have to fight with in the beginning stages when you're setting up your campaign. But once you do it, it doesn't take long at all, or you don't have to mess with it too much anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab this guy here. So here's the human noble paladin. There's a folk hero. So maybe this ranger type, kind of this stoic ranger looking guy. And then, of course, I forgot to drag the other one back on there, but that's okay. And then a criminal rogue. I always use this little halfling dude, even though he may or may not be who you want, but this is a Lightfoot halfling. So I'm going to go back to page 1. I believe he's in here under halfling. Let's see if he's here. I always use the same guy over and over and over. So let's see. I think it's next to this page here. Yeah, so he's in one of these. Let's see, halfling. Here's a gnome. But this is basically just to get these set up. Once they're done, I don't have to mess with this too much anymore. Okay, so I'm just going to use this rogue female, or maybe this thing here, just so it looks like a rogue. And then again, I'll drag that over to the hotkeys or in the combat tracker. So now that I have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check these out from the character area where you select characters, the manager. And one of the guys I forgot to drag over was the paladin. So now they're all on the combat tracker, and I have them all stacked up. So the nice thing about this is I can click on this link on the right-hand side, and it will bring the sheet up to the top. And this way you don't have to fight with the interface and spread them all out across the screen. You can have them all in one area. And whenever you need to look at the sheet, you can just click on this link, and it brings it up to the top. And then the next thing I'm going to do is drag the links from the combat tracker to this player area on my crib sheet so I don't forget who's who. And then I can drag and drop these over here so I know which character and who's playing what, that sort of thing. And then I'll put notations on there as to who's playing what character, like their Discord name or their email address after these names. And this also gives me quick access to the player character sheet. So if I click on these links here, it brings them up. So that's another way you can kind of save yourself time. So when I'm clicking on all this stuff, I can close all this stuff. And when I come back to play for the first time in a while, or maybe the following week, bring up my crib sheet, make sure I have the crib sheet where I want it to go, so I don't need it this big. So I'll probably just put it up here for now. And then it brings up the combat tracker, brings up the party sheet, which is the next step. So I'm going to take these guys and drag them onto the party sheet because that's where you want these to go. Once all the characters are built and all the characters are claimed by your players, then you're going to drag them over onto the party sheet, which is how you manage your gold and your experience and such. So that's that. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And then you have your character manager, and then you also have your reference manual for the adventure, depending on what you're needing to do. So this brings up all the stuff that you might need during your game, and then this player list, I'm going to go ahead and click on these links here, and that actually brings up all the players in one shot. You could also do that too on the right-hand side here on the combat tracker if you want to do it that way. But the reason I have it here is so that I know who's who, and I put the name of the Discord name or their real name or their email address or whatever it takes until I get to know everyone. So this is just kind of a preliminary thing. Now for the Stormwreck Isle part of this, the adventure that we're going to run, I'm going to go through chapter 1 and kind of read through this. So if you've never used the reference manual, you can pop these sheets out and you can bookmark them, or you can place them where you want them to go, however you want to do it. So typically, when I'm running an adventure, I usually have the maps and such on the top right corner, and then I'll have my reference material down below. So I'm going to go ahead and rearrange this and set up the way I want for the adventure. So I'm going to stretch this out, and then I'm going to kind of shorten it up a little so it's not too big or too overwhelming. And then maybe even just a little bit smaller, and then park that here. If you need a little bit more room on the side here, like if you're getting crowded on your desktop, you can collapse this menu on the right to give you a little bit more room. And also you can collapse it again, and you can really shrink it up. But I think having it, full size is unnecessary. I like this middle size. I think that's plenty good. And then now I have a spot for this. And then next time I bring this up, I don't have to have covering things and sitting all over the place. So essentially what you can do is you can come to this introduction, and then you can use the page numbers down here on the bottom to go through the credits and through all the chapters in the book. So you can kind of use this as a way to kind of read through the adventure. So it's chapter 1, it gives you adventure outline. For chapter 1, it introduces Runara's cloister and its inhabitants and provides the characters the opportunity to learn about the problems facing the island. So it's setting up all the quests. It also describes additional encounters that you can use in the course of the adventure. You don't have to do it all at once. Including a magical hot spring with mysterious guardians at the site of an old brass dragon's death. So there's a grave kind of thing where it sets up. So this is the only thing I'm going to worry about right now is chapter 1. I'm not going to worry about all these other chapters. I might read ahead a little just in case I need to know some of the stuff, but for the most part, I'm just going to focus on chapter 1. And these are all the different things in the chapters. So you got the Dragon's Rest. You can read about this a little bit. And then there's some dialogue here that you can send to the chat when you are bringing your characters to the Dragon's Rest. And it says, your journey was uneventful, but the island, now visible off the bow, promises rare wonders. Seaweed shimmers in the countless brilliant colors below you, and rays of sunlight defy the overcast sky to illuminate the lush grass and dark rock basalt of the island. Avoiding the rocks jutting up from the ocean, your ship makes its way toward a calm harbor on the island's north side. So it's kind of like setting up the adventure and the scene. And then when you get to Dragon's Rest, you actually can click on the map. You can expand it from here. I don't know if this is the DM's map or not, but what I normally do with these is I will take them and I will drag it over and expand this so that I get a better view of it. And then this thing here, I think it's still a little bit too tall, so I want a little bit more room for the map. And what I'm doing is sizing the window first. I'm not worried about the map yet, just the frame. And then if you click somewhere in this map with your left mouse button, you can use the mouse wheel if you have a center mouse wheel or center mouse button. If you have a 2-button mouse with a Mac, it's harder to do, but you use this little navigator over here. But if you have the middle mouse button, you can click on a map, hold down the mouse button and move this anywhere you want, and then release it when you're done centering it. If it gets off centered, like maybe you're way over, maybe the map is way over there or something like that, you can click on this down arrow, and up here in the toolbar you have the zoom to fit button, or you can right click, go to view and change zoom to fit, and that'll do the same thing. It'll kind of recenter, and then you can just kind of mouse in and out. And you start down here in this corner, and that's where the adventure begins. And then you have these locations that are only viewable by the GM, by the way. And then when you want to look at the map and set it up, you can unlock the map. You're going to turn on the line of sight, so we're going to enable and disable the line of sight, so that's why it turned dark. We're going to also do line of sight options, and then if you click on this is going to be completely dark. It's because you don't have anyone on the map, and no one has dark vision or anything like that. So I'm going to take all the players and set up their formation, and this is something we might go over in our session 0 as we're setting up. So there's a section in the party sheet. So I'm going to click on the party sheet. I'm going to expand it out a little bit so I have a little bit more room. And then on the tabs on the right hand side, there is a spot for order. So you can set up the order that your party normally travels in. So this arrow here is indicative of the direction they're going to go. So you can switch which direction they're going to go. I'm just going to leave it as up or north, but you could turn it over here to the right, so they're kind of going to the right to start. But I'm going to set up this. So I want to put the paladin up front, so I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop him here. The cleric soldier is going to be behind him, probably in the center. I'm going to have the wizard right behind the cleric here. And then the folk hero is going to be in the back, so you can kind of watch things, and he's got like a bow and arrow, so he's got more range. And then we have a rogue here, which I will probably put them back here. So this is kind of the marching order that we would normally keep. And then when it comes to, this would be like a dungeon formation, so maybe you want an outdoor one. So the outdoor one, I'd probably put this paladin there, put this guy up here, do something like that. That way you have a little bit of formation difference. And then on the map itself, I can zoom in and use this little friendly formation, or you can also do it down here in the combat tracker. But I'm going to drag and drop and set that on here, and that will set that. But see, what I notice is that for some reason this may not be the right map, because it's just probably a reference map. I have to look at that. So if I want to go and make sure that I have the right map, and then I want to also see if there's a grid. So this one didn't have the grid set on it. See how it's like that? So there's no grid set on this map. So this is not the right map. This is kind of more or less a reference map for just the DM to look at. So what I will do is I'll close this. I'll go into the actual adventure, into the campaign area, and go to the images and maps area. And then I can filter this to Stormwreck Isle, and then maybe chapter 1. There's a picture from there, and let's take a look and see what the maps show. So here's the map of Stormwreck Isle. So this is a map that you could share with the players so they kind of have an idea of the region, like what it looks like. And then over here, maybe there's some maps that I want to look at. So let's go to the players section. That just shows the picture of the NPCs and the players. So let's take a look. So here's Dragon's Rest players. So yeah, it's a completely different map. It's a little bit higher resolution. So I kind of started off with the wrong image. So that was embedded in the actual reference manual. But this is the image that I want. And then I'll start off the characters in here. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Yeah, this is set up for the players, and it's already set. And then there's some layers here that you could possibly have that are numbered, where you can actually put numbers on here, have your own layer, turn them on or off so you can have the labels. That's what all the new adventures are like now. This one was made right before the changes to Fantasy Grounds. So again, I'm going to drag the formation over here onto the map. And then I'm going to recenter these, kind of like put these guys where I want them to go in regards. And you hold the shift key if you need to go through a wall. So this is where I'd start these guys off at. So this is just kind of getting set up. So this is where I'd want to be before I start the campaign. So you got all the players on the map, all the characters are built, and then the actual adventure is kind of ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and close the party sheet for now and just run it from here and just use the arrows on the bottom to navigate through here. And there's an actual battle map that I already have up here. So I didn't go far enough in the adventure to realize that. And then there's an encounter called Drowned Sailors. And it is already on the map, so I want to see where they show up at. So I'm going to hit the down arrow. Okay, they're in the ocean. They're kind of like probably on the beach. So I'd probably put them like somewhere in here, probably close to the players when they pop up out of the ocean. So that's an encounter that's coming up. So that's all ready to go. They're not visible on the map yet for the players, but they're ready to go. So it says that I'll click on this. That sends it over to the chat. It says, as you're about to leave the beach and start your climb, you hear a ruckus of splashing and a wet gurgling moan behind you. 3 figures are shambling up the water's edge about 30 feet away. They're dressed as sailors, but their skin is gray and they look drowned. Seawater drools from their slack mouths as they lurch toward you. So these are zombies, and they're basically all set and ready to go. So it says about 30 feet away, so we'll back these up. But essentially, they can't reach you exactly. They can get right into melee range on their first attack if that happens. And then it tells you to review the stat blocks. It kind of goes over the combat. So it says, if the characters turn and fight, this is the first encounter on the island. Here are the steps. So it tells you to review the stat blocks. So when you have the stat block here on the combat tracker, you can also stack these up like I've done with the players. And I just kind of drag and drop those onto the pile here. And then you can go through and look at the stat block. So they have Undead Fortitude, they have an Unusual Nature, and they have a Slam attack. And then quite often these NPCs will have more information on the other tab. So if you click on Other, it's going to have an image and it'll give you some backstory. So this could be something that you want to share with your players. If you want to remind yourself, you can also put a little link there so that if you want to share that image, you don't have to find it again. You can just click on it, right click, and then you can share this image with your group. Go to sharing, share record, and that will push that to your players so they can see what the zombies look like. You do the same thing for the map. You right click on it, go to sharing, and then share record, and then you can see the map that they're on. Once they claim their characters, this is a daytime scene, so they shouldn't have any problems with vision. But if it was a nighttime thing, they wouldn't see that. And this is kind of what the players see now as they have the lighting set up. And these are cliffsides, so they can't see on top. But I'll go ahead and turn that off for right now. This is the player vision, so you can kind of get an idea of what they see. So this is kind of grayed out now. So this is kind of like a hybrid view, the GM and the player view combined. So this is kind of where you want to be when you're adventuring. So it tells you to review the stat block. So I close them, but if I bring them back up, they're going to be right where I left them. And this is how you want things to look when you're getting ready to set up for the game. And then it tells you to use the initiative rules to determine who goes first. So all the zombies go on 7. But if I go to menu and initiative, I can roll all of them, or I can roll just for the NPCs or the players. So I'm going to roll for the players since I don't have anyone connected to the table. And this is actually the new order for round 1. So we're at round 0, essentially. And the first one on that list is the wizard will go if it comes down to combat. And then it tells you that on the initiative count, they move toward the characters. So on their first turn, they're going to close in the gap. If the characters are more than 20 feet away, the zombies can use a dash action so they can move farther. So they can move about 40 feet using the dash action. But they can't do anything for that round because they've already moved, half or double in their movement. So the undead fortitude kind of reflects how hard it is to kill the walking corpses. So it prevents them from dying. It just kind of slows them down and it makes them go down, and they'll still be flopping around and stuff. So it kind of makes it dramatic. But nonetheless, that undead fortitude says that if you reduce them down to 0 hit points, they make a constitution save with 5 plus the damage taken, and if the damage is radiant or from a critical hit, that's the way it is. But on a success, the zombie will drop to 1 hit point instead. So that's just a note that you need to learn or know about, but when you're running this encounter. And then they have their slam attack. So essentially, this is where you want to be for this first encounter for Stormwreck Isle if you're going to run it through the book, the official version of it. Now, you can do it any way you want, but this one has a combat encounter right off the bat. You're fighting 4 zombies, or 3 zombies, and you got your party of 5 here. So this is kind of where you want to be for setup. And I go through this with Lost Mine of Phandelver or any other module that you're going to run. Is you're going to set it up kind of the same way. If you're doing the Age of Ashes for Pathfinder, kind of the same thing. It's mainly the layout, the organization, and knowing where stuff is, and then how you place the windows and where you want them to open when you're getting ready to run your game. That's really what helps take some of that grief out, and it helps with the UI clutter. Now, if you have a tiny monitor or like a laptop that has like a small screen, I don't care which way you shake it, it's going to suck. If you have a monitor or some kind of computer screen that's past 19 inches, I don't know how many centimeters that is, but whatever you have as far as your visual space really does make a difference. So if you're playing on a tiny little computer, I don't know if your experience is going to be as good. Maybe as a player, but as a GM, definitely not. It's going to drive you nuts because you're going to have to keep moving stuff around. So I'm on a monitor that's like 28 inches, I think, and then I have the scale set back a little bit, and then I have the font that kind of makes this text here a little bit larger than normal. So that's kind of how the setup is for here. But basically, I just have Stormwreck Isle, and I have the SRD. So you can start playing just with that. You don't need to have every single book out there. The only drawback is that you're going to eventually need the player's handbook or something if you want to advance the characters. But as far as, I think this adventure gives you up to like 3rd level or something like that. I don't remember. But it is a thing. And sometimes you want to look over the characters before the players get on the table. So if I go to the Actions tab, that's not bad. It's got all the spells. It's got one of the wizard abilities. The only thing that might be missing, and I wouldn't necessarily say is missing, are the elven traits. And really, they don't do much, but just add a note to the actual sheet in this case. The rogue, let's see what they look like. So we're going to bring their sheet up, go to the Actions tab. So they have the main things, sneak attack. I need to put, how many daggers and their ammo in here. And a short bow is 2-handed, so I need to change that. But other than that, that's pretty much all you need for this character at this level, because they're pretty low level. Let's look at the folk hero, go to their actions. Now they have fighting style archery, and they have second wind. So archery is essentially, in this case, it's a passive ability that you activate in the beginning of the adventure. So I'm going to go ahead and activate it, and what this does is adds +2 to the attack roll to this particular character. So that's something your player is going to want to know when they first start. And I'm going to go to the soldier cleric. This is a priest, essentially, dwarven. He's got a hand axe, got a mace. There's his spell slots. There's his dwarven resilience. So that's kind of another passive ability that you want to activate. So in this case, it's resist poison. So I'll go ahead and put that on here. And then the spells are already set, so I can change this to combat and actions, and this character's pretty much ready to go. And then I don't see any of the domain abilities, like turn undead is one thing that you'll want to look into. And then there might be, depending on what their domain is, you might want to find out what the domain ability is and add it. So if you go to their abilities and you look at their features, it just has the spell casting. They don't have a domain selected yet, so maybe that's second level, but nonetheless, this is just something you want to look at. The next thing is the Paladin. Go to the Actions tab. So they have this Lay on Hands ability ready to go. The battle axe can be used one or two-handed, and the ammo's already set up. So you don't really have to do too much with the Paladin. Let's take a look at his abilities. So he's got Divine Sense. That could basically be turned into a ability. So if you pop that out, it's not going to do anything mechanically, but you can make this a action for this particular Paladin. So if I bring this over and drag it on here, it at least is going to give me the description. It's easier to look at. And then I can go to the standard mode and group and assign it the same group as this Paladin ability. So I'm going to just control copy, control V as in Victor. And then it says it's 60 feet. So I might just go 60 feet just so we know that it has this range. And then it says you can know the type of any being or presence that you sense, but it's not, you won't know its identity. But within that radius, you can also detect presence of any or object that has been consecrated or desecrated. So if you had this on and you were, playing this character, you should have been able to sense those undead. So this would have been a good thing to have on. So what this is that until the end of your turn, you'll know the location of the celestial, a fiend, undead within 60 feet of you that is not behind total cover. So you know the type of any beings whose presence you sense, but not really the identity. So this might be something that you would want to add as just a note. It's really not going to do anything mechanically, but it is going to give you that sense. So this might be something where you just put a note on here. So I'm going to right click, go to add action, go to add effect, even though it's really not going to do much to the character. Set it to targeting on self, and it says till the end of your turn. So I want to put, is there a turn here? There's rounds. Okay, so I'll just put round, and we'll do 1, so it will expire. And then we'll do Divine Sense as just the description, and then put a semicolon, and then just put detect or sense evil, I'll say. Sense undead, evil, fiends, demons, whatever. Just so you can have a note there. And what happens is when the player has this enabled, it'll put it in the combat tracker for them so that they can use this. So it helps them with their actual abilities, and it reminds them to check for that. It also reminds the GM, because the GM doesn't remember everything. So this is just a way to kind of notate what they can do, and it kind of gives you a note. So we'll put that up there in a sec. So I just added a notation there. This doesn't do anything mechanically, so it's just going to add a note for the player. And then when they want to know what it is, they can pop that open and read it. So this is just a note, and it's an effect, though, that we put on there, even though it doesn't do much. And then when we're in actual play mode, there's a little button there, and you can click this, and this is like a passive ability, but it's more or less a reminder. And then after the turn's over, then it expires. So if I go through all these turns, it will expire off the sheet, and I'll have to, basically re-enable it, or you can just leave that off where it just stays on. It just depends on what you want. But essentially, that's basically the types of things you want to look for before the players join the table. Make sure they got all their stuff and that, all their sheets are set up right. Check their inventory. Make sure that they have the correct things enabled, like to have their weapons and armor equipped, all that kind of stuff. So anyways, I think that's enough for today, but this is just a rough idea of kind of how to get set up and get started to run your first adventure in Fantasy Grounds. Again, this can be applied to other rule sets. Same kind of process. Use the same methodology, just swap it out for Pathfinder or Call of Cthulhu or whatever you're running. So take care, everyone. You have a good week.